Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives. And today, we're going to be discussing the 28th film to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now, this is a film that I was kind of a little worried and excited for, all at the same time. For starters, it was a proper Doctor Strange sequel. Now, and if these vlogs have showcased anything, it's that when it comes to Doctor Strange's tenure in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, after his initial debut, he was kind of treated as a side character. An important side character, but a side character nonetheless, as other appearances since his initial solo film have usually had him be like a cameo or another main character co-starring with everyone else. Like, he made a cameo in Thor Ragnarok where he helps Thor find Odin on Earth. Excuse me, popcorn. He became a major player in both Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. Of course, from the last vlog, we saw him working alongside Spider-Man with the whole crisis involving the multiverse. So, essentially, Doctor Strange getting a full-on sequel was something that a lot of people were interested in, myself included. And to top it all off, the title of the movie, Multiverse of Madness, that had me hooked. I friggin' love the multiverse. It is one of my favorite concepts in science fiction altogether. The idea of traversing alternate realities, parallel universes, meeting alternate versions of yourself, seeing how life could have been under different circumstances, it all is so fascinating to me, especially if you meet another version of yourself. Talking with them, fighting with them, I think it's all just really damn cool. So, seeing that as a title, I had to see it just for that alone. However, that's when tumultuous circumstances began occurring. Apparently, the original director left because, in his own words, and I'm not quoting this directly, but this is me just paraphrasing, he felt that this really wasn't his movie, and thus it wasn't something he was comfortable doing, and so reins for the film were handed over to Sam Raimi, who, based on what they wanted for the movie, they wanted to be kind of a somewhat horror flick, so they needed someone who was experienced in that, which also helped that Sam Raimi directed other Marvel movies with the original Spider-Man trilogy, so that's a thing. And on top of that, another thing that worried me, Wanda Maximoff was going to be in it. And that's not really a problem in and of itself. It's just that prior to this movie, she had her own Disney Plus show in Wanda Vision. And for those of you who have not seen my the What If edition of the MCU Perspectives, I'm just going to make this perfectly clear. I was not interested, and I am still not interested, in the Disney Plus shows. And that doesn't mean they're bad, by any means. That does not mean they are bad, and I'm not pissed at you if you decide to go watch them and you end up enjoying them, because far from it. From what I've heard, they are really damn good. I'm just diametrically opposed to the idea of having to watch an entirely different television show just to understand the events of this single film franchise. I think it's annoying. It's like having to read a comic book, and it's like reading a comic book and then having to read a tie-in to understand this one major plot point that occurs. And don't point out to me that that's what actually happens in comics. I know what happens in regular comics. I think it's stupid there too. It's just, so the idea of having that be the case of the movies, it annoys me. With that being said, if a show does become important to a movie later on, then I will watch it. But if it's not, then I'm just gonna pretend it doesn't exist until it becomes necessary for a future movie. Which, again, some of you are probably gonna get angry at, but this is just my viewpoint. You are free to have your own, and like I said, that doesn't mean the shows are bad at all. Like I said, I've heard nothing but good things of them, and if it will help you make you feel better, there was one show that I genuinely was looking forward to seeing and did sit down and watch when it came out. What If? That's why I did the What If edition of the MCU Perspectives, which if you're interested, you can go find those. As each vlog is me talking about a different episode from What If, and I had a lot of fun with that one, even if the show itself ultimately came out to alright to decent status. But that's not what you were here to talk about. We're here to talk about this movie. And so when I learned that Wanda Maximoff was going to be in there, combined with the fact that she had her own show, I knew that that was going to be required viewing, and I did end up watching it in preparation for this movie. So this was a film that I was both excited for, yet hesitant for. So in a way, I was but when the film did come out, I did eventually see it. Didn't see it opening weekend due to money issues, but I actually had a good time. I found it very interesting to see, and it definitely felt like it belonged in the MCU, and you can kind of see the Sam Raimi influences throughout the movie. But now that I've seen it again, does it hold up? Well, let's take a look at it and find out. And just a heads up, spoilers abound. The film is but 2 weeks old at the time that I'm recording this, so if you haven't seen Multiverse of Madness yet and don't want to go in spoiled, turn away now, because I am going to spoil this film rotten. Part of these vlogs is that I go over every major plot detail before I get into my thoughts on the film, and that's the whole movie. I'm not going to leave anything untouched. So like I said, if you want to go see the movie and you don't want to go in spoiled, turn away now. And just another fair warning, I'm also going to be spoiling the events of Wanda Vision a bit, so yeah, if you haven't seen that, that's doubly so. But again, you've been warned. So with that out of the way, let's get to the spoilerific plot summary. And the film actually opens in a weird other world. Essentially, it's supposed to be called it's supposed to be a nexus point between all different universes, as it's supposed to be it's essentially this big, large, I don't want to say void, because there are structures and pieces of buildings and debris floating throughout it. It's multicolored, and in the center of it is this weird shrine containing a spell book called the Book of Ashanti. And it turns out that there are people in this void. In this case, a young girl and Doctor Strange, although he looks a little different, apparently having a ponytail and a slightly different outfit. However, both the girl and Strange seem to be running towards the Book of Ashanti, and they're being pursued by what looks like a demon. While Strange does his best to hold the demon off, it does keep catching up to them. Pretty much just, Steven does his best to try and hold this thing back, even tries trapping it, but unfortunately the demon is getting too powerful and even manages to wound Strange a bit. As such, realizing this thing is a threat, Strange turns to the young girl and begins siphoning something from her. You see, they mention in dialogue that this thing seems to be after the young girl's power, so to speak. And unfortunately, with the idea that this thing could possibly get to America sorry, I spoiled her name, I'll get to that later, and get to this girl and get her power, Strange decides, screw it, and just starts siphoning the power himself, citing that she can't control it, and they can't let it fall into the wrong hands, but Strange can control it. And while this young girl is pleading with Strange not to do this, since they're friends, and all that, Strange's only response is, and I actually really like that they included this line in the movie, "In the grand calculus of the multiverse, your sacrifice is worth more than your life." Very creepy echo, considering that we heard that not even a movie ago in the MCU. But Strange doesn't get a chance to finish siphoning her power, as the demon manages to get free from Strange's prison and, well, stabs him right through the chest. As such, the girl is set free and tries running past Strange's body and the demon to the Book of Ashanti, but the demon manages to catch her and just holds her in place, when suddenly, in the rush of the battle, this girl's eyes glow, and a weird star portal opens up behind her and sucks herself, the demon, and Strange's body through. But as it ends up flying through, our Stephen Strange wakes up, now completely ponytail-less and in his bed. He just he writes this off as a nightmare, and we see him get out of bed, put on a suit, put on a broken watch that he had, and which I think he's had in the last movie. I haven't seen the film in a long time, and I didn't rewatch my own vlog for that, so apologies if I mentioned something about that in there and don't know and not specifying any details, but essentially, he's getting on a nice Armani suit, gets the broken watch, and it turns out he's going to a wedding. Whose? Christine's, his girlfriend from the last movie. It turns out that after the events of the first Doctor Strange, Stephen really did not keep up with her, and as a result, she kind of wound up seeing other people, and, well, like I said, now she's getting married, and to a guy I forgot his name, Chris? I think it was Chris, I don't know. But he's a fan of Strange. But after the ceremony, Stephen meets with Christine at the reception, and they kind of chat it up. They're clearly trying to be cordial. Stephen says he's happy for her, but he also apologizes to her because he says, "I couldn't be there for you. My position keeps me from actually getting close to people. Don't want you to get hurt." But Christine clarifies to Stephen, it never would have worked for us, even if you weren't this all-magical super person. As in her own words, and I did write this down, "Because, Stephen, you always had to be the one holding the knife. And while she says that she will always respect him for it, she knows that she could never love him for that. Essentially, it just means that regardless of the situation, Steven's got to be the one that puts his life on the line. So, yeah. It's the idea of Steven having to have himself be the center of everyone's universe, so to speak. However, this conversation gets cut short as they hear commotion going on outside in the street, and so Steven, being the resident superhero on the scene, switches into his sorcerer jammies and flies out to the street to find out what's the cause. And sure enough, he finds another monster. This one looking like a giant tentacle thing with monster with one eye that seems to be attacking a bus. Steven manages to use his magic powers to hold it in place and disassemble the bus to see what it's after. And it turns out the girl from his dreams is on the bus. Steven manages to save her and get her away from the creature, but this thing, it just starts pursuing Steven just right from the get-go. And while Steven does his best to fend it off, it ends up ultimately knocking him into a shop and knocking him out. And that's just the creature then goes after the girl. But thankfully, more help arrives in the form of Wong, who begins immediately doing his best to fend off the creature as well, even managing to push it aside and allow the young girl to get a chance to escape. Which I think, okay, I was looking at my notes during this part, but she does basically in her escape. I think Steven's cloak. Oh yeah, Steven's cloak actually went away from Steven and helped her get away from the creature by getting her on top of a building. But unfortunately, the monster, realizing that the girl got away, ends up chasing after her and climbs to the building. Steven manages to get up, and so he and Wong manage to try and hold the creature back, but it still keeps going. And ultimately, how they manage to defeat it is Steven using his powers to grab a street light and use his power and essentially throw it right at the creature straight in the eye, ripping it out and causing the creature to fall to the ground. And yes, it is gross. As such, with the creature now thoroughly dealt with, Steven focuses his attentions on the girl, as he begins asking what the hell's going on. And while she does attempt to run away and stop him from following her by taking Steven's sling ring, Wong still has his, so they easily catch up to her, and again, Steven demands to know what the hell's going on, as not only is this creature attacking her, but he did see her in his dream the previous night. As such, the scene cuts to them sitting in a cafe, and the girl explains the situation. And I'm gonna give the full situation here because we only get part of the story here. We learn the rest later. But I think it's just easier to get it out of the way here. In this case, the girl is named America Chavez, and she is not from the MCU. She is in fact from another universe. And the thing is, the reason the creatures are hunting her is because of that. America has the power to jump between parallel universes. It's a power that she discovered when she was a kid, under not the best circumstances, as she is supposed to be from like this paradise dimension, and so in that dimension she lived peacefully with her mothers, and while she was out in a garden and she gave her moms a flower, well, a bee flew too close, and when she freaked out, that's the first time she wound up using her powers, and unfortunately, the suction from the portal not only sucked her through, but her mother's as well, to where even she doesn't know, and she is very much under the impression that they could potentially be dead. And as such, for years, America has been jumping from universe to universe, not really having any control over the situation, because, yeah, as the Strange in the dream we saw earlier said, she can't control her powers. While they do activate from time to time, it's usually when she's in a high-stakes, stressful situation. So, yeah, she doesn't really know what to do. So, she's really just a helpless kid with power who has really no idea what she's doing or how she's going to do it. Now, Doctor Strange is a little dubious of this factor, because she doesn't seem to have any proof, but she does. You see, Steven actually, like I said, Steven did mention about his dream and how he saw them both in it. Thing is, that wasn't a dream. And America brings Steven and Wong to the roof of a building where they find the corpse of the other Stephen Strange that America was traveling with. It turns out, and I think this is a stupid explanation, apparently dreams are the windows to the multiverse, and when we dream, we are seeing through the eyes of our alternate selves from other realities. I'm gonna call bullshit on that, because if that's the case, then what about those dreams that I've had where I'm not in them? Or was my counterpart in those universes one of the characters in those dreams? Because I remember having a dream about a detective once who solved a murder, and I remember one time that I was like a version of me who jumped off of a building. That's not a joke. That was a dream I had once. When I hit the ground, I woke up. But so I don't know how that works. But apparently, yeah, Steven dreamed up that a little event, and this other Steven is proof that America is telling the truth. As such, they begin asking her if she knows who's pursuing her, and all she can really say is that it's a demon who wants her powers. She doesn't know who the demon is or why they want them, but it's a clear idea that whatever this thing is, whatever covets her powers, allowing it to have them is a very bad idea, as not only would taking them kill America because they're such an essential part of her, but having a monster of that much destruction just able to freely roam the multiverse, it's a bad idea in general. As such, both Steven and Wong begin trying to theorize on what to do. Steven moving his counterpart's body into, I want to say a little mound in the building, and just kind of leaving him there to be buried. But they're at the same, as such, they decide they're going to take America back to Kamertaj so she can be safe. But in the meantime, they're trying to find any leads they can on the monsters that were chasing her. And one thing I've noticed is that the octopus monster and the demon from Steven's dream, apparently covering their bodies were these markings, which Steven identifies as magical runes. And when Wong hears this, he says, "That's not sorcery, that's witchcraft." And upon hearing that, Steven thinks he might know who the right person to call in order to figure out what's going on with America. And it's here where I'm going to have to take a slight detour from the plot summary, because the person he wants to talk to is Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch. Now, like I said, gotta take a detour, because it's at this point that I should probably explain the events of WandaVision. I'm not going to talk about every single little thing that happened in WandaVision, because there are parts that I think are important for understanding this movie, and parts that I think are important for understanding other projects further down the line. So I'm only going to talk about the things that are important to understand this movie. So like I said, if you haven't seen WandaVision, turn away now. I'm going to spoil a lot of big stuff, because it's kind of important for understanding the movie. So here we go. So in WandaVision, what happened was that after the events of Avengers Endgame, Wanda wanted to give Vision a proper burial. The problem is, she couldn't find his remains. She was able to track them down to a government organization called SWORD, which is actually an organization that Captain Marvel's friend, Maria Rambeau, had set up in between that movie and the present day. However, Maria wound up dying in the 5-year gap between Infinity War and Endgame due to cancer. And as such, control of SWORD was handed off to this other guy whose name I do not remember at this time. And the thing is, it turns out the reason SWORD had Vision's body was because they were experimenting on it, which was actually a very big no-no at the time, because apparently, as part of the Sokovia Accords, you're not supposed to experiment with AI because of what happened with Ultron. Plus, in Vision's will, he actually stated that he didn't want anyone to mess with his body, because that's just desecration of a corpse, even if he was an android. As such, while he allowed Wanda to go in and see the body and pay her last respects, he refused to let her take it away with her. As such, Wanda did pay her respects and left the SWORD building peacefully, but she wasn't in a good state of mind. As such, she drove away in a car and went to a little town called Westview, as in Westview, there was a little plot of land that Vision had bought for him and Wanda, and the plot of land was for them to build a house where they were supposed to just grow old together and spend their lives. And now with the realization that Vision is gone, especially considering that she was the one that killed him in Infinity War, before Thanos undid it and killed him himself, Wanda just went to that little plot of land and feeling the weight of not just Vision's death, of not just being the one that had to blow up the Mind Stone, but also just all the trauma in her life. Losing her parents, being caught in a war zone, losing her adopted family with the Avenger, losing her actual family with her brother, and finally topping it all off with the death of the man that she loved. She snapped. And I mean she snapped hard. In a fit of rage, Wanda wound up unleashing an explosion of power that completely encompassed Westview. And the end result, the entirety of Westview was trapped in her own little pocket dimension that was called a hex. And within the pocket dimension, she essentially controlled reality, shifted the world to suit her ends. And to suit her ends, she transformed the entirety of Westview into the setting of a sitcom called Wanda Vision that had herself as one of the main stars, and the rest of the people in town as the supporting cast. And as part of this spell, she wound up creating a second Vision, one with no memories of any of the Avengers movies. And so throughout the show, Wanda and Vision, hence why it's called WandaVision, wound up just kind of going through typical sitcom problems, with each episode, for the most part, going through different eras of sitcoms and just the hijinks that had followed. But as you do, eventually the whole thing came crashing down, as the thing is, nobody in Westview was wanting to do this. The only reason they went along with it as they did was because they were being influenced by the spell. Their real personalities were definitely behind there. They knew they were trapped. They wanted out. And you want to know what made it even more horrifying? Because of the sitcom nature of the show, apparently there were plots that didn't involve their kids, which meant that the kids in Westview were all just stored in the rooms unless they were needed. Meaning that some parents didn't get to see their children or hold them or even acknowledge them at all. That's fucking horrifying. Yeah, eventually the hex was noticed by government officials, and through various methods, Wanda did eventually realize that what she was doing was batshit insane, that she was holding these people captive and they wanted to go free. But as a result, by the end of the series, she did pull down the hex, but it cost her. As you see, inside the hex reality, she had really born a family. She and Vision were a happy couple, and they had kids. Two boys by the name of Billy and Tommy. And while they were byproducts of the spell, all three of them, Vision and the kids, were fully autonomous. And so when she pulled down the spell, all three of them went away with it. As a result of this, Wanda wound up going into self-isolation after the movie, though she took a few souvenirs with her. We'll get to that in a moment. And as such, it's in that self-isolation that we actually catch up to her in Doctor Strange, as we see her in an apple orchard, though the apples haven't bloomed yet, and just kind of doing some general farming, which is when Steven goes to see her. You see, at first she thinks that he's there to talk to her about Westview, but even Steven says, no, it's fine, I knew you'd do the right thing in the end, I'm here to talk about something else. And so he begins to get her up to speed on what's going on with America. He says, there's a girl with these weird powers, a demon is hunting, there's a girl there that we're meeting with who has the power to jump through the multiverse, a demon is hunting her, wanting her powers, and I think you might be able to help us because of your great magical power, which, again, I'll get to in a minute. As such, Wanda does take this into consideration, and she throws out the possibility of bringing her to Wanda. She actually says, why don't you bring America here? I mean, I know what it feels like to have powers that you don't really want, and etc. Don't really want and don't really know how to control. And as she's walking along, she noticed that Steven stopped following her. And she suddenly realized Steven never told her America's name. And so Wanda says, the hex was the easy part. It was the lying that was the hard part. And so Wanda waves her hands, and we soon see that this entire apple orchard is another hex. And in reality, the orchard has been completely burned down. The land has been razed. It looks like the entire thing was just burned down in a fit of rage. We even see her, because earlier in the scene we saw her little cottage among the orchard, and it looked nice and peaceful and serene. But once we see the hex go down, you see that even the friggin' cabin has been caved in. It looks like it's been destroyed in a fit of rage. And once the hex goes down, Wanda changes clothes, and we see her holding a book. Which is where we get back to our WandaVision connection. You see, during the events of that show, one of the people that helped wake Wanda up to what she was doing was another witch. A witch by the name of Agatha Harkness, who sensed what Wanda had done in Westview. And the thing is, Agatha was like an ancient witch from like the Salem witch trials, who had the power to steal the magic of other witches, which made herself more powerful, but wound up leaving the original witches as husks. And seeing what Wanda did, how she was able to encompass this whole town, she wanted to know how she did it. And it turns out that Wanda is kind of a big deal. Now, throughout these vlogs, I've called her the Scarlet Witch, because that's her general superhero name in the comics. But the thing is, in the movies themselves, we have never heard Wanda get called the Scarlet Witch. It's always been Wanda Maximoff. But it wasn't until WandaVision that she was officially called that. Because it turns out in the world of magic, the Scarlet Witch is a big deal. It is a being in the multiverse who has the power to control chaos magic. Magic that is so powerful that it eclipses the Sorcerer Supreme. And Wanda is that, and like I said, Wanda is that person. It's how she was able to take over Westview as she did. And how Agatha knows this prophecy is because it's listed in a very ancient spell book called The Darkhold, of which Agatha had a copy of. Now, by the end of WandaVision, Wanda managed to beat Agatha and wound up trapping her in the persona that she had created for herself for Wanda's sitcom world. But as a souvenir of her defeat, Wanda took the Darkhold for herself. And she was doing some bit of reading. And it's clear that by the end of this movie, it's starting to take a toll. As Steven puts it, the Darkhold corrupts everything and everyone it touches, and it's clearly got a hold in Wanda, as we see physical signs of corruption with her fingers now being black, and as the film goes on, you can see the color just slowly draining from her face, her eyes going black. Yeah, she's not in her right mind, and she just gets worse. And yeah, it turns out that Wanda is the bad guy for this movie. She was the one that sent the demons to capture America, and she's been hunting her. And the reason why she wants America's power is because she wants to see her kids again. You see, in the vast infinite realms of the multiverse, there are other Wanda Maximoffs who still have their children, who still have Billy and Tommy, are raising them happily. They don't have husbands, for some reason. Oh, I'm not saying that there's nothing wrong with being a single mother, I'm just saying that I'm just surprised there's no Vision in the picture. But, at the same time, and the thing is, Wanda wants her kids back. Like, really bad. And as a result of this, but the thing is, while her magic is powerful, she can't she can't physically travel to parallel universes, which is where America comes in. She wants to absorb America's power so that she can freely jump between realities. And while it is pointed out later in the movie, why couldn't she just have America port her to another universe and just start living there? She mentions how, well, what if my kids get sick? What if something happens? Well, with the multiverse is infinite, that means there's got to be a solution for everything. So I'd have to use that power. So I have to have that power for myself, so I can just go to another universe and help the kids that they get sick. Yada yada, blah blah blah. It's clear that she's not playing with a full deck of cards, and she is not taking no for an answer. Even when Strange starts trying to argue with her and saying that what she's doing is wrong, that she's playing with forces she has no hope of controlling, she's not really listening, and even tries throwing his little thing, his plan to give Thanos the Time Stone in his face, saying, "Oh, you weren't supposed to do that either. Yet you see me doing this here, and and yet you're still here when I'm the villain. How's that fair?" Put simply, she's not listening, and Stephen did tell her that America was at Kamar-Taj, and so Wanda gives Stephen an ultimatum. Give America to her, and she'll just leave peacefully. But if Stephen wants to put up a fight, well, as she puts it, it's not Wanda who's going to be going to Kamar-Taj, it's the Scarlet Witch. As such, Stephen returns to Kamar-Taj and passes this message along to Wong and co. And yeah, realizing that Stephen told Wanda exactly where America was, everybody goes on lockdown. Kamar-Taj, all the students are armed. They start calling in sorcerers from every corner of the world. They start just turning into a fortress because they know if Wanda gets her hands on America, it's just going to lead to bad things. As such, everyone is armed, and we actually do get a really creepy entrance for Wanda as she comes in on this big gray puff of smoke that encompasses all of Kamar-Taj, and as it encompasses them, you can hear just like light screaming coming from inside. And then you see a weird red light that looks like the eyes of a demon, and from that red light comes Wanda, just floating there. As such, Steven tries one last time to reason with her, tell her that she can stop this now, that she shouldn't hurt a child, and while Wanda tries bargaining with Steven as well, saying, if you let me through, I can send you to a universe where you and Christine are happy, but again, Steven is not willing to cross that line, and Wanda Wanda finally just tells him, I've been very patient with you. I sent those demons in there because that was me trying to be nice. Now you're going to have to deal with me, and I'm out of patience. As such, Steven returns, and the battle is on, as all the students in Kamar-Taj try putting up a shield around the structure to keep Wanda out, but unfortunately, she's able to use her powers to whisper in the ears of one, and as you do, all it takes is one weakling to break a mighty chain, and essentially with him running, he disrupts enough of the shields for Wanda to come bursting through, and she just starts fucking wrecking the place, as she just starts blasting and obliterating buildings, people, knocking everything aside. Anyone who throws blasts at her, she's able to deflect. Anyone that she gets close to, she rips a friggin' part. In one scene, after she destroys everything, one guy who's still alive, she just turns to dust. Everything is just going to hell and a handbasket, and essentially it's very much a losing battle. And in the midst of this, Steven, Wong, and America run further into Kamar-Taj, and once Wanda is finished pretty much obliterating the forces outside, she tries to go in, and while they're able to slow her down by trapping her in the mirror dimension, that's all it does. Slows her down, as Wanda quickly realizes, wait, I'm in mirrors! And so, as a result of this, when Steven, America, and Wong get to the central chamber, Steven tries to sling out, but Wanda used her powers to destroy a sling ring, and she ends up locking all the doors so they can't get out, and through the reflections, she begins trying to get into the room. And while they're able to cover up most of the reflections, she does end up coming through in the reflection of a shield, which honestly looks friggin' grotesque, as you see her just crawling out of the shield, and you can see her body twisting and mangling in just unhuman shapes before she finally gets out. It's just, you can tell that Sam Raimi directed this movie, is what I'm saying. And pretty much, once she makes it clear that, and once she tells Steve... As such, Steven once again tries one last time to bargain with her, but she makes it clear that she's not listening. She knows there are other universes where Billy and Tommy are alive. She wants to go there, and in her own words, she's not a monster, she's a mother, and mothers do everything they can for their children. And as such, and Steven actually throws a very armor-piercing question in her face. I'm going to see if I can find it. Hold on. What if you reach them? What of the other you? What happens to their mother? And this just gets Wanda pissed off, as she immediately tries to go for America. While Steven and Wong try putting up a good fight, she easily just knocks them both aside and gets to America and starts siphoning her powers. And in the stress of the situation, America opens up another portal. And while she can't physically go through that because Wanda's holding her in place, Steven ends up diving at America, and while Wanda does briefly blast him, all she does is end up blowing a hole in his cape, and as a result, Steven and America end up falling through the portal, and in a very trippy and honestly very visually interesting scene, as you see Steven and America just smashing through all these different parallel universes, all of them looking visually distinct and neat, and depending on which universe they go to, their physicality changes with it, until finally they end up crashing into another version of New York, one that looks a bit more futuristic, while also one with nature, so to speak. And as when they land there, the portal behind them ends up closing. As such, Steven immediately wants America to open another portal and send them back because they left Wong behind, but like I said, America can't control her powers, so they're kind of stuck, and which even Steven realizes it'd probably be a bad idea to go back anyway, as Wanda clearly outclasses them, and he really doesn't have a plan right now. As such, they begin wondering what exactly they're going to do, and I'm just going to look back in here. They realize that if they want to, the thing is, they realize that if they want to fight Wanda, they need to be able to play on her field. She has the Darkhold, and so they propose, and so they begin wondering, what if we use the Darkhold's counterpart, the Book of the Vishanti, which was what America and the other Stephen Strange we saw at the beginning of the movie were doing, as they want to get to the nexus as they went to the multiversal nexus with the intent of getting the Book of the Vishanti and using its power to fend back Wanda before they knew it was actually Wanda. As such, while Steven does kind of brush it off, he does realize it's probably a good idea, but the problem is they have no idea where to look for the Book of the Vishanti. Like I said, Steven just thought it was a myth. But America says, but they start realizing, what if we talk to this universe's Stephen Strange? Maybe he'll know. As such, Steven realizes that maybe she's onto something, and they begin traversing through, and they begin going through and exploring this parallel universe, which is actually pretty nice. I love when it comes to multiverse stuff, it's always cool seeing alternate universes and how locations and people we know are filtered through them. So it's really visually interesting seeing America and Steven walk through this alternate version of New York, because there's a lot there that looks familiar, but also looks very strange. Like, there's still tall buildings and parks and so forth, but like I said, there's also reeds intertwined around certain buildings. It looks like it's half modern civilization, half a garden. It actually looks visually interesting, especially when you see all these different civilizations and societies coexisting in this world and so forth. It's really cool and very nice, very visually appealing. But as Steven and America are walking around, we actually run into a very interesting cameo. Because if you know anything about Sam Raimi, you know that he likes to cameo a certain actor in each one of his movies. In this case, Bruce Campbell, who's running a food cart called Pizza Papa, where America went and stole some food, because apparently in most other universes food is free. But as such, while Steven tries to calm the guy down because he accuses America of stealing the food, he immediately looks at Steven and is like, oh. And he actually does call him by Doctor Strange and asks him where he got the outfit, the Strange Museum. And while Steven ends up just knocking the guy aside and ends up casting a spell on him so that he literally starts beating himself up, which is hilarious, this does raise a few questions. Ultimately, as a result of this, as Steven and America go along, we have some more character stuff with them, that we get to the flashbacks that I mentioned via this machine that's supposed to let you relive your most important memories, but eventually they manage to reach this universe's Sanctum Sanctorum. And they soon realize why Bruce Campbell mentioned the Strange Museum, as in front of the Sanctum Sanctorum is a statue dedicated to this universe's Doctor Strange, who as said in the plaque, apparently died in battle against this universe's Thanos. As such, this is a lot for Steven to take in, but this also raises the question, if he's not around, who's watching the Sanctum? And they soon get their answer as the owner steps out of the building, and it turns out it's this universe's Baron Mordo. And something I kind of find both interesting and irritating is that, remember how at the end of the first Doctor Strange we had that after credits scene where we saw Mordo turn bad as he started stealing other sorcerers' magics? Well, apparently in between movies, Mordo and Doctor Strange have clashed, which again makes sense. But I kind of would have liked it if we could have seen that, or if he was important in another movie. So I'm going to say that's both cool but annoying. Cool but annoying. So there you go. Bottom line, though, with the knowledge that Mordo is a bad guy, Steven is not exactly willing to trust this guy first, but his fears are slightly assuaged when Mordo goes up to him and says, I knew this day would come because you knew this day would come, and embraces Steven in a hug, calling him brother. As such, Steven, kind of surprised by this, does end up following Mordo into the Sanctum Sanctorum, and along with America, and America and Steven begin kind of explaining what the hell's going on, about how Wanda's chasing them, how they're from another universe, etc., about what she wants, etc. Essentially, Mordo talks about how if Wanda is using the Darkhold, then then it's not just monsters they need to worry about. You see, in the Darkhold, there is a spell. A spell that allows whoever wields it to do something called dream walking. Going back to the stupid theory this movie posits about when you dream, you're dreaming of your other selves' lives, this spell not just allows you to see your other selves' life, but briefly inhabit their bodies. Again, it's brief. It's a dream. You're not taking over their bodies permanently, but as long as the spell is active, you can control them as easily as you can control your other body. And as such, since Wanda previously mentioned that her patience is at an end, it's kind of clear that when the next time that Steven and America deal with any of her hijinks, it's not a minor monster they're going to be facing, it's going to be the Scarlet Witch herself inhabiting her counterpart's body. As such, with this knowledge in mind, Steven does want to ask Mordo for more clarification, but as he stands up, he starts feeling a little woozy. You see, during Steven and America's conversation with Mordo, Mordo got them tea that they both easily drank up. Turns out the tea was drugged by a strange mystical substance called the sane of Ashanti, and which, as we later learn, actually apparently can dampen magical prowess, and apparently when ingested causes anyone who ingests it to pass out, as both Steven and America end up passing out right there in the Sanctum Sanctorum. And the next time you see them awake, they're kinda sorta trapped. They're in a government facility. I'll get back to that in a minute, because in the meantime, while they're asleep, we actually cut back to Wanda, and she is enacting the Dreamwalker spell, and manages to find the universe that Steven and America ran off to. And using the Dreamwalker spell, she briefly does inhabit the body of the Wanda Maximoff of that universe. Though she does get briefly distracted because this version of Wanda does have kids, of her own versions of Billy and Tommy, who just act like sweet little kids, and it's actually a really kind of nice tearjerker scene as you see Wanda just briefly spending time with them, seeing them have this little song asking her to get them ice cream. It's just like, it's a nice little scene. You see Elizabeth Olsen easily convey that in her facial reactions when she sees Billy and Tommy. Like, you can just see her heart breaking as she just sees them all, as she sees them just having fun and playing around. And you could just see the elated joy that she has just being able to see them and hug them again. And what I kind of find amusing is that she actually does try to get them ice cream. You don't see that in the initial scene, but later on you do. Later on, when the spell does end and she collapses, you do see that she dropped a spoon, which means she was and bits of maybe a plate or a bowl, which means she actually was going to get her kids ice cream, which again is just kind of sweet and hits all the right emotional chords. However, back into the main MCU timeline, we see Wanda as she's performing the spell, as she stands in the middle of these ruins, and across from her you see Wong, who is being held captive. However, while Wanda decimated a lot of Kamar-Taj in order to get here, there was one sorcerer who managed to escape. This woman that was like Wong's personal assistant, and the thing is, they know that if they want to stop Wanda, they gotta get rid of the Darkhold. And while Wong initially is the one that wants to destroy it, this sorcerer says no, someone else has to destroy it, and so she just dives at the Darkhold, grabs it, and stabs it through with a magical knife, which ends up destroying it. But the feedback from it ends up killing this sorcerer as well, and unfortunately with the Darkhold destroyed, the Dreamwalker spell is abruptly halted, causing Wanda to go back into her body, which actually is a very cool scene, as you see her just simultaneously in control, both in and out of the MCU between her bodies, before eventually settling back into her main body. And, well, she's not happy that she got woken up so easily. As such, she goes to Wong and demands that he hand over the spells from the Darkhold, since he's like we learned in No Way Home, he's the Sorcerer Supreme, so he must know the spells. But Wong says he doesn't, and even if he did, he wouldn't tell her, but she uses some of the surviving sorcerers as leverage, and as a result, Wong ends up breaking and does tell her that the Darkhold she held was just a copy. That the spells it held are actually copies of these same spells from a location called Mount Wundagore. And the thing is, in Mount Wundagore, and as such, Wanda decides to travel to Mount Wundagore with Wong leading the way, and they do eventually get in there, and I do like the design of Wundagore. It looks like a very creepy, decrepit tomb, and you see the spells just kind of etched into the walls of it, And it turns out it's guarded, as once Wong and Wanda get there, they're surrounded by these big 4 rock monsters with glowing red eyes. And while both are ready to go into combat, all 4 of the monsters stop when they see Wanda and bow. And the reason for this is because it turns out Mount Wundagore is the throne of the Scarlet Witch. As such, Wanda is just perfectly at home here. And so, while Wong does again try to talk her down and tell her what she's doing is crazy, eventually she's had enough of him and just tosses him off the mountain. He's fine. He is fine as we see him still climbing up the mountain bit by bit. But in the meantime, now she's left unattended, and now at the source of all the spells from the Darkhold, she begins doing the Dreamwalker spell again, and once more takes control of her counterpart in the universe that Steven and America went to, which we later learn is called Earth 838. Is it called Earth 838, I think. I'm trying to find it. Yep, it's Earth 838. Also, one thing that annoys me. They call the MCU Earth 616. No, it's not. It is not. I still do not care if it's supposed to be the main timeline for the movies. They have given the MCU an official Earth number in the Marvel multiverse. It is Earth 1, I don't know how many nines. And we've seen in the comics that the MCU is part of the Marvel Multiverse. So no, I do not accept that it's Earth 616. I do not give a damn. I do not care. I don't. I think it's stupid. I still don't like it. Sorry. That's just a little, as a nerd who pays attention to this shit, I notice that thing. I notice stuff like that. So, yeah, apologies. But anyway, with Wanda doing the Dreamwalker spell, we can come back to Steven in America. And like I said, they wake up in a facility. And it turns out, and unfortunately, they're not exactly in a means to get out. As Steven has been given these high-tech cuffs that are, like, laced with the sands of Ashanti, so he can't access his magic. And America, well, like I said, she can't control her power, so she's no help either way. But it turns out the one in control of this facility is this universe's version of Christine, who it turns out volunteered for this position after her universe's Strange died. And essentially what she's doing is that she's just trying to test them to see if they're a potential hazard to their universe. After all, they're from another universe. They could be carrying contagions or viruses that they have no defense against. So they're just trying to be sure that they're not much of a threat. As such, we do get this moment where Steven and Christine talk, and so we get it's a nice little moment as Steven is just trying to wrap his head around seeing her in this alternate universe, but he also does try to warn her about the Scarlet Witch. But Christine isn't exactly in a listening mood, especially since, yeah, it turns out that the Doctor Strange of this universe is just as good with relationships as the Doctor Strange of the MCU. Unfortunately, though, in the middle of talking, they're interrupted by the appearance of Mordo, while Steven, while talking to Christine, said, I don't care who owns this facility, the Avengers, S.H.I.E.L.D., or whatever, it turns out that the people who own this facility are none of those. It's a different organization called the Illuminati. And before you think this is the Illuminati, that this is like the typical Illuminati, this is actually different. The Illuminati in the Marvel Universe, and this goes with the comics too, are actually made up of these high-profile figures and the brightest minds from across the Marvel Universe. And in this reality, it's no different. Hold on one second. Sorry about that, once again, dog. Anyway, yeah, Illuminati, made up of brightest minds in the Marvel Universe, no different in this reality. And it turns out that and as such, Steven is brought to this little antechamber where he goes to meet them, and it's here we actually meet some honestly very cool faces from superheroes. Like Baron Mordo is apparently a member of the Illuminati himself, as with the death of this universe's Stephen Strange, he was named the Sorcerer Supreme. But other members in the chamber include Captain Carter, right from What If, though I doubt this is the same version from that show, as that universe seemed to be very close to the MCU, but it's still pretty cool to see her here. Black Bolt of the Inhumans, who I have not really talked about a lot in these vlogs, but essentially the Inhumans are like a subspecies of humans who have this gene that, when activated by something called the Terrigen Mist, gives them superpowers, and Black Bolt is their king, who his power is that he has a sonic yell, so to speak. I say it's a yell, but pretty much any volume of his voice, even as much of a whisper, is enough to create a sonic boom that can obliterate structures. So he's mostly a mute, which honestly I think is really cool, and I do want to look at the Inhumans one day. I've never actually seen the show, not hear good things about it, but it's something I would like to look more into, especially with that. So yeah. On top, another member is this universe's Captain Marvel, who in this reality is not Carol Danvers, but her friend Maria Rambeau, which I think is pretty cool. And two other members who their very appearance in this movie I think is really damn cool. Firstly, Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. It's not the same actor as in it's not the same one of the same actors in the previous movies, but it's still kind of pretty cool to see him here, especially as it's essentially just Disney flexing their muscle saying, yeah, we own the film division of 20th Century Fox now, so now we can include these people in the movies. But the biggest Easter egg of all is the last member of the Illuminati that shows up. Professor Charles Xavier, founder of the X-Men, who, guess what, is still played by Sir Patrick Stewart from those movies. And he plays it exactly how he played it in those movies. Soft-spoken, kind, stern, but ultimately a force for good. And I love that. I friggin' love that. But the thing is, despite all these little Easter eggs, the Illuminati want to see Steven because, well, they see him as a potential threat. Not just because he's from a parallel universe, but because he's an alternate Stephen Strange. Of course, this kind of confuses our Doctor Strange, because he's wondering, well, why are you... It's like, what are you talking about? Isn't your Strange a hero? He died fighting Thanos, and even in this introduction to the Illuminati, they stated that they were set up by their universe of Strange. And it's here that the Illuminati reveals something. The story of Stephen dying in battle to Thanos, kinda exaggerated. It turns out that when Thanos attacked in this universe, like in the main timeline, the heroes of this world banded together to fight against him, but their Doctor Strange wanted to go at it alone. And how he went about this was by using the Darkhold of their timeline. Through the Darkhold, he dreamwalked and looked in other universes to see if he could find a possible solution to beat Thanos. But unfortunately, in his dreamwalking, he caused something called an incursion. Essentially, an incursion is something that could happen if two or more universes interact and interfere too much. Essentially, it causes the boundaries between those two universes to erode, and as a result, both universes end up essentially colliding with each other and destroying one another, essentially resulting in everybody in both universes dying. And the thing is, in the case of Earth 838, Steven, his incursion, he wound up causing one and killed an entire universe. Something that he does confide in everybody, but he makes it and as a result of this, he just wipes his hands of the Darkhold and joins them in fighting Thanos and also hunting down the Book of the Vishanti. And with its powers, the heroes of this Earth were able to fend off Thanos, but Steven was still named a threat, as we see with the Scarlet Witch. Anyone who uses the Darkhold, unfortunately, is corrupted by it. And while Steven was a viable asset in taking down Thanos, unfortunately, the corruption from using the Darkhold has started to seep in, and unfortunately, all the heroes, Steven himself included, realized that he had to be taken out before he was a threat, and so the Illuminati, well, again with Steven's permission, wound up killing him using one of Black Bolt's whispers. As such, they told the public the story that Steven died in battle because they wanted to maintain his image as a hero, but unfortunately, because of this revelation and the fact that he caused an incursion, the Illuminati started to think that Stephen Strange, that not just their Stephen Strange was a threat, but all Doctor Stranges. And what I find interesting is that this attitude is kind of reflected in the demeanors of each member of the Illuminati. As the instant many of them see Stephen, it's clear that that at least half of them don't like him and immediately kind of want him gone. Because, yeah, that's why they're here. They're voting on whether he's a threat or not, and if he is, they're going to take him out like they did their Steven. Because Black Bolt, he kind of looks a bit like he looks a bit condescending, but is clearly on guard. Captain Carter just immediately looks like she's just pissed. Like she looks at Steven and thinks, "Oh God, what is he doing here?" While Captain Marvel, she just fucking doesn't like him. Like she immediately sees him and she's just all crass and arrogant, like, "Oh, really? He's here too? Oh, can we get this over with?" And anytime Steven objects, tries warning them, she's like, "Oh," it's like, "Oh, don't worry, we can take care of it. We know you're the real threat here." Like she's just condescending and bitchy to him. It's just, ugh. The only people, even Mordo thinks he's a big threat. The only ones in the Illuminati that actually treat Steven with respect are Reed Richards, who does actually talk down to him, and while he still sees him as a threat, he does still try to talk with him and say, it's like, "I'm sorry we're doing this, but we're trying to take precautions here just in case." While Charles Xavier, he does actually talk to him like he's another person, like he's actually a person and not just a monster, which, again, I like that. But like I said, that's why they're here. They want to vote and see if Steven really is a threat. However, before anyone can vote, the facility is broken into by Wanda, who just begins slaughtering the guards, which I say slaughter, but their guards are robots, which another little thing I like. Their robots are Ultron, so that's kind of funny. But essentially, she's just walking through them and nothing is stopping her. As such, the Illuminati put a hold on the voting, and as such, Mr. Fantastic, Captain Marvel, Captain Carter, and Black Bolt all run off to go deal with Wanda, while Xavier and Mordo stay behind with Steven. However, during all this, Xavier does talk to Steven and say, if you do manage to get out of here, seek out the Book of the Vishanti. It can help you. It can help you on your quest to protect this girl. And while Mordo thinks that Xavier is stupid for even saying this to him, Xavier says, and I wrote this line down too, just because someone stumbles and loses their way doesn't mean he's lost forever, which I think is a very Charles Xavier thing to say. He's someone who holds on to hope even in the darkest of times, and considering that his best friend is Magneto, makes sense why he would probably have similar opinions on Doctor Strange. The Strange he knew was a good friend of his, and this Strange clearly wants to protect this girl. So, and the thing is, when he showed him how they killed Strange, he actually did show him it with his mind. So, odds are he probably saw in Steven's head and saw that he was a good man trying to do the right thing. So, I like that. I like that. But put simply, but back with Wanda, she does manage to get through a good chunk of the guards, and he even manages to get to the lab where America is being held. And while Christine is trying to help America get out of there, she realizes, oh shit, you guys are telling the truth, I gotta get you out of here. Unfortunately, it's a losing battle. Thankfully, the Illuminati end up showing up to face off against Wanda, and they get slaughtered. Brutally. Wanda uses her magic to get rid of Black Bolt's mouth, so when he screams, the Sonic has nowhere to go, so it destroys his brain, so it caves in his skull from the inside. She uses her powers to rip Reed Richards apart, seam by seam. Captain Carter, who does manage to get a good fight in, ends up getting severed in half by her own shield. And Captain Marvel, she's launched right into a wall and has a statue dropped on her. It's a brutal battle, and no one is spared. So it's just kind of effed up. In the meantime, though, but then as such, while Christine is still having problems with getting America free from the glass case, it gets to the point where they just start bashing on the glass as Wanda begins using her powers to screw with the controls of the cage. However, one of America's abilities that I didn't talk about is that her powers are kind of controlled by her punches, and when she starts trying to punch the glass, she actually does manage to create a star-shaped crack in the wall. So all it takes is one good punch. All she really needs is like one more good punch, and it can shatter it. But Wanda's too close. But thankfully, that's when Charles Xavier shows up, and he uses his powers to essentially distract Wanda by getting her in her head. And while he does try to get the Wanda of this universe out of the prison that the Scarlet Witch put her in, unfortunately, the Scarlet Witch's powers are too strong, and even in the Mindscape, she manages to sneak up on Charles and snap his neck. Which, yeah, it kills him in the real world too, but thankfully this distraction allowed Christine and America enough time to get America out of the cage, and they both made a run for it. Meanwhile, back with Strange, Mordo is still clearly chomping at the bit, thinking that Strange is that to try and get the vote over with. But Strange realizes he needs to get out of there, and how he does actually get out of there? He provokes Mordo. He begins accusing him of being just as jealous of Strange in this timeline as he is in the main timeline. Excuse me 1 second. Dry throat. And so when he accuses him of actually just of being jealous of this Strange too, because with his death he was propelled to being Sorcerer Supreme, well then couldn't he... Well, what if he even says, you probably gave him the Darkhold yourself? And this pisses Mordo off enough that he finally decides, okay, screw it, I cast my vote, and he tries to kill Steven, which actually leads to a pretty cool hand-to-hand fight, which ultimately... But it allows Steven... But in the fight, Steven manages to get Mordo to cut through his cuffs, get one of them off, and as one little bit of screw you, he ends up cuffing Mordo, causing his magic to be dispelled as well. And in their fist fight, they end up falling into this little pit in between that separated the Illuminati members' chairs from the judging area, and from there, Steven manages to separate his cup from Mordo's, and he ends up jumping out of there, leaving Mordo behind. As such, he ends up meeting up with Christine and America, who also took the time to get Doctor Strange's cape because he lost that too. And it turns out Christine actually patched it up. How? She took a portion of the cape from their universe and stitched it in to replace Steven's cape, which I think is kind of cool. The only difference, it's essentially because they're essentially both the same cape. It's just that one's blue, one's red. So I like that. But the thing is, the Scarlet Witch is still hot on their heels. As such, they need to find the Book of the Vishanti, and the thing is, Xavier, before he went off to go face Scarlet Witch, mentioned that Steven had created a waypoint to the Nexus of Realities so that he could find where the Book of the Vishanti is. So all they have to do is get there. And while Christine is a little hesitant to trust Steven because she knows Steven, and even in this universe, he was a risk taker, America does vouch for Steven and convinces Christine that he's on the up and up, so she ends up removing his last remaining cuff and allows him back access to her magic. As such, the trio end up running to the basement of the base with the Scarlet Witch hot on their heels, and it's a very creepy chase scene because Wanda has clearly sustained a lot of damage from all the fighting she's done. She's barefoot, limping, there's like oil and blood on her face. She looks like a fucking demon as she just keeps pursuing them, especially as her eyes are glowing. But eventually they are able to fend her off, as when they get to the tunnels below, Steven ends up breaking through a water vein and ends up flooding the tunnel. He knows that it won't kill Wanda, but it will at least slow her down. As such, they get to the room that's supposed to have the waypoint, and it turns out the key to it is Steven's broken watch, as the only person that's ever opened it is Steven. As such, using his own watch, Steven is able to open the vault, and sure enough, it leads the trio out to the Nexus of Realities that we saw at the beginning of the movie. And there in the center of it is the Book of the Vishanti. As such, all three jump in, and it looks like things are going to go well as Steven walks up, grabs the book, and he thinks this will be the end of it, only for Wanda to once again show up and grab America. And while Steven tries blasting Wanda to fend her off, Wanda is able to counter with her own blast, which not only throws Steven back, but destroys the Book of the Vishanti. So yeah, all this was for nothing! As such, with one last bit of screw you, Wanda ends up using her powers and takes control of America briefly so that she can access her powers. And through it, she opens a portal and just throws Steven and Christine into some random corner of the multiverse. In the meantime, she uses her powers again to open up a portal to the main MCU timeline, just throws America through, and once she's on the other side, Wanda ends up ending the Dreamwalker spell, which frees the Wanda of this reality, and since she's free, she runs back to go check on her kids. In the meantime, though, as such, America is now just trapped with Wanda when Wanda is ready to just siphon her powers. But meanwhile, back with Steven and Christine, we find out which universe they went to. And it turns out this universe is kind of effed up. As it turns out that this is a universe that seemed to face its own incursion, as we see buildings crumbling and frozen in place, dust storms that seem to come from nowhere, streamlights that seem to go all over the place. It just looks dead, desolate, and creepy, and just wrong. Everything is falling apart, but yet frozen in time. There are things that just there are structures that seem to float away into the sky. They hear storms, but no lightning. It's just all just creepy and off. As such, Steven realizes that they need to get back to America, but they need help. But they can't. But right now they don't know how. As such, Steven's plan: what if they went to? Even if this place has been destroyed by an incursion, maybe they could check and see if the Strange of this universe had a plan. As such, they end up traveling through this world's New York, and they do find this world's Sanctum Sanctorum, which is in one piece, though a part of it is crumbling in the same fashion. And it turns out there is still someone living there, as when they look through that little glass window at the top, they do see someone living inside. As such, Steven goes on ahead, leaving Christine behind, and when he gets inside, it does look it looks just as off as everything else, as when he goes inside, the stairs actually lead into a big void, which leads into the attic. And so when he goes up there, he does end up meeting the Stephen Strange of this universe, who looks like a very broken man. He's clearly aged, not doing well for himself, and pretty much it looks like he's just not doing well, as he claims that the reason the universe is like this is because he lost. As such, Steven doesn't really ask more questions, as he begins asking, the thing is, I need to get back to America Chavez. Things are going wrong. I need her help. But this other Strange just continues talking about what happened. And it turns out, he's the keeper of this world's Darkhold. Which Steven, realizing that they really don't have any other options, asks if he can borrow it. The other Strange, though, warns him that there are consequences to using the Darkhold. It casts a heavy toll. Steven thinks that, what other toll can there be? This universe has clearly gone to hell. So what's the worst that could happen? And then this other Steven reveals why he's the holder of the Darkhold. You see, remember back when I mentioned that Steven went to talk to Christine, and he said he was all happy for her, and that she was off marrying this guy? Well, that same thing happened to this universe's Steven. And he lied. He was not happy for her. He was not happy, and so he sought out the Darkhold so he could dreamwalk and peek into other universes and see if there were other versions of him that were with Christine, that were happy. But he didn't. Every universe he went to was just more of the same. And as you do with the Darkhold, this Steven went mad. And in the fits of his anger, he began killing alternate Doctor Stranges, using the Dreamwalker spell to essentially just kill them all one by one. Yeah, put simply, this Strange has gone insane too from wielding the Darkhold, and a physical manifestation of that with him, he's got a third eye on his forehead. As such, he gives our Strange an ultimatum. He can have the Darkhold, but in exchange, he wants the Christine that he brought with him. Steven, of course, is not going to let a psycho have Christine, and as such, both Stranges end up getting into a battle, which is probably my favorite in the movie, because it is the stupidest. How they fight is that they take sheets of music and literally turn the music notes into weapons. And throughout the whole fight, with every music note that both Stranges shoot at each other, the music that they represent is playing throughout the whole fight. And it's so fucking stupid, but so fun. It's honestly just amazing to behold. And I look at it and I think, this is why I love comic books, people. This is why I love comic books. But ultimately, our Strange is the victor, as he uses a string from a harp to essentially disrupt their spell and blast the other Strange back, blasting him outside and causing him to get impaled on a fence. As such, Steven, now alone with the Darkhold, realizes he needs to use it to get back to his universe and help America. Christine walks in, and when she sees him with the Darkhold, she says, "Oh my God, you're actually going to use this thing. All you Strangers really are alike." And Steven does not deny at this time, but it's clear that he does not really care what he thinks of her. America is in trouble, and he needs to help her. As such, he's going to try and use the Dreamwalker spell to try and get back to his universe to see if he can do something. And he tasks Christine with guarding his body, because this is not going to be an easy task. Christine even asks, "Well, how can you do that? Doesn't the Dreamwalker spell require that there be at least a living copy of you in that universe?" But even Steven says, "Who said it has to be living?" And we get to, honestly, one of the best parts of this movie as well. as Steven casts the Dreamwalker spell and inhabits the corpse of his dead counterpart from the beginning of the movie. That's right, everyone. We have a zombie Doctor Strange in this film. And it is fucking glorious. When he moves around, it's clear that his body is still suffering from rigor mortis. He can barely control it. His moves are erratic and just weird and all over the place. And even the makeup is just really creepy, as part of his mouth is rotted away, his eyes are sunken in, there are gashes across his face, it's all gray. It's just really creepy, and I fucking love it. However, as such, Steven uses his counterpart's sling ring to get to Wundagore, which I don't know how he even knew that Wundagore was where he needed to go, but whatever. He was just looking for America. But upon getting there, the souls of the damned come spewing out of his body because, by virtue of Steven inhabiting a dead body, he's breaking a rule of nature, and pretty much the spirits very much tell him either get out of the body or you're going to get dragged to hell. As such, they try and do this, and a few spirits do break through to Christine's side, which she managed to take care of. But she does give Steven a pep talk, saying, "You're the master of the mystic arts. You can control them." And this gives Steven enough power to actually take control of the dead and force them to do his bidding, transforming all the souls into a giant black cape made up of writhing arms and skulls and demons. It's so fucking creepy, but so goddamn awesome. And with them, he's able to fly to Wundagore, and thankfully, this is around the time Wong finally managed to get to the tomb. And as such, Steven and Wong begin fighting side by side to fight off Wanda and just start beating her back, knocking her aside. Steven ends up sicking the souls of the damned on her, and then it's just like a really awesome scene as they're all just swimming around, grabbing at her, knocking her aside, and it's just like silly, stupid, scary fun. And again, it's clear that this is a Sam Raimi film because it fits right in with like an Evil Dead movie, and I love it. But while she's distracted, Wong and Steven end up trapping her in a cage, but it's clear that's not going to hold her for long. And even Wong tells Steven, we can't do this forever. We have to stop her. And so Wong tells Steven he needs to absorb America's powers. At this point, when Steven goes to get America, he does let her know it's him, and she's starting to realize that that there is no other way here. After all, she can't control them. Wanda's right there, and she's beating them at every turn. If they don't want her getting the powers, they need to go to someone who can actually control them and can fight and fend for themselves. But Steven actually says something else to America. He tells her, again, I wrote this down, trust yourself. Trust your power. That is how we beat her. And he tells her that she's been able to control this power the whole time. Even the first shift, she led her right to this moment, which I think is still stupid, but whatever. I guess he's trying to give her a pep talk. But bottom line, he tells her this is her power, nobody else's. She can control it, and she is its master. She is its master, and she can control it. And with this little pep talk, Steven is able to give America the boost that she needs. And while Wanda does break free from the energy ball with all the souls in it, but she can't really do a lot more damage, where America comes up and ends up just decking her right in the face. And the result of this opens up another portal. And when America realizes this, it leads to, honestly, a very satisfying scene where Wanda tries to intimidate her again, but America just keeps wailing on her, and with every hit, she keeps opening portals to different dimensions, and she's just not letting up for a single second, even ultimately opening a portal to a world that's like covered in magma and lava. But ultimately, Wanda does get the upper hand of her and does end up and shows that even with America mastering her powers, Wanda is still stronger than her. As such, America tells her, fine, I'll give you exactly what you want. And so she punches her again and opens up another portal, and in response to this, Wanda just grabs her by the neck and holds her down until the camera pans over and reveals where the portal led. It turns out it led back to Earth 838, specifically the home of that world's Wanda Maximoff, as her Billy and Tommy are sitting in the living room watching TV and playing video games. And the instant they see this woman who looks like their mother trying to choke this young girl, they start screaming bloody murder and call for their mom. Wanda, of course, is pissed at this because the fact that she's doing this at all is not a good thing. She didn't want her kids to know how she was able to get to them, but she throws America aside and rushes to the kids and tries to get them to calm down, but all they're doing is just like throwing things at her. And on top of that, when their mother comes down, she tries to defend them, but Wanda just used her powers to like throw her into a wall, which prompts the kids to just start yelling at her. It's like, leave my mom alone, leave her alone, you witch! And finally, it causes our Wanda to just snap at them and tell them to knock it off. In response to this, Billy and Tommy end up hiding in just fear, just begging her, don't hurt them. And immediately Wanda just backpedals, like, no, I won't hurt you. I couldn't hurt anyone. I'm not a monster. And in that moment, Wanda quickly realizes she's not the good guy here. She realizes that she's not the victim anymore. She really is a monster, and she can see that truth reflected in her son's eyes as they look upon her in terror. As such, when Wanda finally comes to the reality of all the terrible things she's done, all the people she's hurt or killed to get here, it breaks her again. As a result, she ends up backing away and falls to her knees while Billy and Tommy run to their Wanda to check on her, make sure she's okay. But the 838 Wanda sees her MCU counterpart, walks up to her, and as our Wanda looks up to her counterpart, 838 Wanda tells her they'll be loved. And at this, the MCU Wanda backs away, steps back to the portal as it closes, and America quickly closes it. As such, Wanda realizes how far she's fallen and decides that she's going to ensure that no one else will fall this far again. As such, America ends up getting herself and Wong out of there, and they leave Steven behind because he's already inhabiting the body of a corpse. And so Wanda ends up using her powers and starts destroying Wundagore. As she says, she was tempted by the Darkhold, but she's going to ensure that no one else will ever be tempted again. As such, with her power, she ends up completely obliterating the building. And upon the obliteration, the Dreamwalker spell ends and Steven is back in his body. And he confirms with Christine that everything is well, Wanda's been stopped. And for further confirmation for this, they look to their copy of the Darkhold that they had. And with Wundagore's destruction, it starts withering. It withers away and is gone. As with Wundagore's destruction, every copy of the Darkhold across the multiverse starts going with it. As such, Steven and Christine end up having one last little moment together, as Steven does admit the reason why he never got close to Christine at all was probably because he was scared. He was scared. He was alone. He just kept pushing people away. But no matter what happens, no matter the universe, no matter the time or place, he will always love Christine. And that fact will never change. It's actually a pretty sweet and touching moment. And while he does initially offer to bring Christine back to his timeline to check it out, she says that she has to get back to her world because, well, it's her world after all. As such, America ends up opening a portal to their location to help Steven and Christine get out. And we then cut to later as we see that Kamar-Taj now being rebuilt, and America is now training with other students to master sorcery. As such, Steven and Wong have one last little moment together where they talk about other lives, but ultimately that they're happy with the lives they have rather than their other selves. America thanks Steven for being able to get the chance to meet him, and the film ends with Steven taking the watch that he wore in his accident that got broke and fixing it, because it's the final sign that he has moved on, which is especially helped by the fact that the watch was actually given to him by Christine during one of their dates. However, after he fixes it and steps outside, we do get the final shot of this movie, as it turns out that using the Darkhold, even that briefly, did have a negative impact on Steven, as he's walking down the street, he begins convulsing, falls to his knees, grabs his head in pain, and as he yells out, we see a third eye pop up on his forehead too. So, yeah, Steven did not get away from that battle unscathed. However, because it's a Marvel movie, we still have our after credits scenes, and I'll talk about the one that comes after all the credits. It's once again we check back in with Bruce Campbell's character as he's still getting as he's still beating himself up, but it ends with his fist raised, and when he realizes he's in control of his body again, he starts laughing and try before looking to the camera and saying "It's over," which again is a nice little trolling on the audience, so I like that. But the other after credit scene, the one that happens during the credits, is actually one that might be important later, as we see Steven after he had his convulsion, and while he still has the third eye, like with the evil Steven we saw earlier, he's able to open and close it, so for the most part he still looks normal, so he's fine. But as he's walking along, a woman appears, who may be Clea, but may not be, who tells Steven that he's caused an incursion and that they're going to fix it. After she takes out an energy blade and rips open a hole in reality, which actually I think leads to the dark dimension, and so she tells Steven, "Are you ready for this, or are you scared?" And so Steven changes into his superhero jammies and says, "Let's do this," and they both just leap in. So, yeah, what did I think of this? Well, I still like this movie. I still really like this movie. With that being said, though, it's campy as shit. I'm not gonna deny it. This is a film that truly has embraced the fact that it's based on a comic book and just has fun with it. The campiness is kind of apparent throughout the whole film, and Sam Raimi does portray it well in how the story goes along. Like I mentioned before, how there were various scenes that just felt like out of place or weird or just kind of silly. But, for example, the scene with the demons, it definitely looks creepy, but it's also kind of incredibly dumb, especially with seeing Steven unleash them on Wanda, and they're all just flying around screaming in her face and just laughing at her. That's kind of something that you would see out of an Evil Dead movie. And like I said, one of my favorite scenes in the movie was when Doctor Strange fought his evil counterpart in the world that was destroyed by an incursion, and they're literally fighting each other with music notes. I'm sorry, but you can't take that shit seriously. It's two wizards using music notes for battle. It's so fucking dumb, but I love it for that. I love it. But as a result of this, because of the film's campier nature to it in those regards, it is a little hard to take it seriously at points. Going back to that scene, that battle was supposed to be like Doctor Strange facing this twisted, malformed version of himself, but the drama of that scene is underplayed, especially when you consider the fact that this Strange, in his quest to try and find a reality where he and Christine were together, he wound up destroying his own and has clearly gotten twisted as a result. So that kind of twisted drama is kind of underplayed by the silliness of the fight scene, which, yeah, I'm just gonna say is kind of dumb. On top of that, even the final scene with Strange inhabiting his dead counterpart's body, while cool, is still kind of silly. Like, it's especially when Steven goes up to America and gives her this heart-pounding speech about how she controls her power, how she's in command of it, and yet he's doing it while talking with a rotting mouth and with strained vocal cords. This is like, I'm supposed to take this seriously, right? Are you sure this isn't a comedy routine? But at the same time, though, the campiness also, I think, works to the film's favor, because it works to show, because it feels like the film, it's stupid. Let me put it this way. It's stupid, but it's the fun kind of stupid. Another example of this, I think, would also be with the Illuminati. While these characters are only important for the initial scene they appear in, a lot of their members are included for pure fan service, as almost every one of their members, save Mordo, because we already met him in the MCU, are all characters from different branches of the Marvel universe, and many of them you haven't even seen in the main timeline, and all of them are very interesting and unique. I already gushed about seeing Charles Xavier played again by Patrick Stewart, of all people. I think that's just really damn cool. Even having him be a part of the MCU films at all, I think is just glorious. It's a great way, it's a great little cameo to get to just kind of bring in fans of the X-Men and kind of help unite that faction of the movies with these. As again, the X-Men films are their own thing. They're not separate continuity, even despite what Kevin Feige is saying. And if it turns out it's true, I'll go back and watch those films again. But I still think it's kind of dumb, so whatever. Even here, it's still kind of cool to see, especially having him being played by the same actor. But then, of course, you include Reed Richards, who like, again, the Fantastic Four, like the fact the Fantastic Four are even acknowledged at all in these movies, I think is friggin' cool. And when Doctor Strange does see him, he even says, "The Fantastic Four, didn't you guys peak in the '60s?" Which I think, it's a nice little hint that the Fantastic Four did at one point exist in the MCU timeline. So and then on top of that, it's still cool seeing these. And on top of that, there's also Black Bolt, which again is a nice little nod that showcases the Inhumans are around, even if we don't see them as much. And while the MCU did have its own version of the Inhumans, the fact that we actually do see one that looks a bit more comic accurate, I think is really cool. And on top of that, again, the alternate universe stuff with Captain Carter and Captain Marvel. I friggin' love that. Like, Captain Carter, I think, is just a nice little Easter egg for any who have watched What If, because she is a character straight from those series, as if you've seen my vlogs or even just watched the show herself, the very first episode of those featured a universe where Steve Rogers didn't get the Super Soldier Serum. It was Peggy Carter. So seeing a version of Captain Carter in this timeline being recognized, actually being on the council, it's a really cool Easter egg to try and draw people in, so I think I like that. And on top of that, I like seeing Maria Rambeau as Captain Marvel. While she does act like kind of stone cold to Steven and just acts kind of mean to him and just condescending, at the same time, I do love the idea of her becoming Captain Marvel. Not because of anything she's done, though I didn't think she was a bad character in Captain Marvel, but by just the idea of things being different. One of the reasons I love the multiverse is the idea of things just being different. Just having the story altered from what you know, while still retaining a lot of the same elements. And one of the things that they showcase with Earth 838 in this movie is that it's just a universe that's different. Not very different, but different enough. There's not one single event that caused this universe to branch off. It's just different things. The fact that the Fantastic Four are still around. The fact that Captain Carter is this world's is still the first Avenger. The fact that the Inhumans are still around. The fact the Inhumans or the X-Men are potential super teams in this reality. Or hell, Captain Carter. Like I said, I doubt this is the same version of Captain Carter from What If, as that version of Captain Carter, like I said, did seem to live in a universe that mirrored the MCU rather well. So I doubt this is that version of her, especially since this version is killed in the movie. So, but at the same time, it's cool seeing her here. And so seeing a version of Captain Marvel who isn't Carol Danvers but Maria Rambeau, I think is cool because she was one of Carol's friends, so there's just as much of a chance that she could have been flying out, seeing the Kree going after Mar-Vell, and then she was the one that intervened. And I'll give credit where it's due. Okay, I'll just say this. I think her costume is all-rightish. It's the same costume that Carol wears, but instead of being red, blue, and gold, it's all black, which I think works, but I think it could use more flair to it, so it's alright, but I think Carol's is still better. But again, I just liked seeing that. The whole thing it's just like fan nodding. They don't really, like, they're only important for the scenes they're in, but just having them all there, even acknowledged in the MCU, I think is nice, but at the same time, it's also kind of just clearly dumb, especially with the way they're just acting like kind of jerks to Steven for no reason. Especially in the case of Reed Richards, as others have pointed out, him telling because how Wanda knew that Black Bolt was a threat was Reed Richards saying Black Bolt can destroy you with just a whisper from his mouth. And that's when Wanda used her powers to get rid of his mouth. So, you can blame Reed Richards for that. It's just kind of silly it's just kind of silly, dumb fun. And on top of that, America Chavez as well. I'll get to more of her positive traits later, but America Chavez. That just feels like a very bombastic comic book name right there. I'm sorry if you're a fan of her. I don't hate her. I'll get to my thoughts on her in this movie after I'm done talking about what I think is just stupid about the film. But her name is America Chavez. That is a comic book name right there. That is a character who is just over the top and just kind of zany. And from what I've heard of America Chavez in the comics, that name is a rather apropos because it feels like that's the case. From what I've heard, her backstory is definitely more is kind of out there. She does do a lot of zany stuff. She does do a lot of zany but cool stuff. Again, this is all secondhand. Haven't read any of the books with America Chavez, so having that there, it's just silly. And having like all the characters just say with a straight face, America Chavez, America Chavez, like. Why? Why are you taking... Like, there's got to be a point when someone asks questions. There's got to be a point where someone does ask questions about this sort of thing. So, again, the film, throughout the whole film, there's just that silly, goofy, campy comic book flair that does kind of keep it from taking it seriously. But with that being said, it also works to the film's advantage. Like with classic Ben 10, the film seems to be aware of the silly, campy nature of itself, but instead of trying to deny it, it embraces it and leads to a lot of the more fun aspects. While the idea of America Chavez, it does kind of feel a little silly and stupid, she fits in well with everything, and her whole journey does actually bear fruit. I'll get to that later, but it does actually feel like with her inclusion that it does feel more like a comic book movie. Seeing Strange clash wits with the Illuminati is fun, or how he provokes Baron Mordo. I think that's actually kind of fun, and I think that's pretty interesting. And while some of the campier moments can take away from the seriousness of it, when it goes silly, it has a ball. Like I said, one of my favorite fight scenes in the movie is the battle between R. Strange and Psycho Strange. It's just like it's not the biggest battle in the movie or most bombastic, but the idea of both Doctor Stranges turning music notes into magical weapons that they're using against each other, it's so silly and stupid, but I can't help but love it. And I watch that scene, and every time I think to myself, this is why I love comic books. It's so silly and dumb that you kind of have fun with it. And even the scene with Zombie Strange, it's so weird and so creepy. But it also gets silly at times when you see Steven controlling the spirits of the damned, or how he's trying to have a serious conversation with America while he's possessing the body of a rotting corpse. It's silly and dumb, but it's also just fun. Silly, effed up fun. And I friggin' love it. I loved it, every second of it. I could not help but love it. I had the biggest grin on my face during the climax of the movie, and it just plays throughout the whole thing. And I think, it's great. Even an earlier scene too, like when they posit the idea of our dreams are windows into other universes. Wong makes a joke about how so wait, that recurring nightmare of me naked being chased by a clown, and America's like, yeah, that's probably somewhere in the multiverse. Like, that's just, like, they talk about all these weird concepts of the straight face, but it's just, and yet they see, it's like but at the same time, it's clear that they're aware how silly it is, especially when America asks Strange and Wong if they're aware of the multiverse, and they reference the events of Spider-Man No Way Home, and America's response is, wait, Spider-Man? So it was like a giant spider? It's like, no, he's a man with the powers of a spider, hence the name. It's like, what, can he shoot webs out of his butt? It's like, no, he can't. At least I think. I hope not. I love that. It's just so stupid and so funny and yet so zany. I just friggin' love it. There is no way that you can take that seriously, but the film seems to be aware of that silliness, and it embraces it, which works to the film's advantage. Because by embracing that silly, stupid, fun nature, it allows them to do a lot of creative stuff. Again, the fight scene, the Zombie Strange, that's honestly that was really fun. Having them visit the Illuminati, having Strange just intentionally provoke people to get them undoing his way, or having the scene with America just like stealing the food. That's actually kind of funny. That was honestly kind of amusing. It plays with your expectations, but at no point does it feel like it's pushing it too far. The film knows what it is. It knows it's silly and stupid, but it embraces that. And because it embraces it, it allows it to go in directions that you would never expect it to go, and have fun with them. You wouldn't expect a character called America Chavez to be a compelling character, but she is. She's a fun character. She is a kid. Like her actress actually plays it up really well as a kid who just kind of has these powers, and while she doesn't exactly like them, she does have fun where she can, and she does have an attitude, and I like that. Which I'll talk about her for a second there. I like her inclusion in this movie. When I saw in the trailers that they were going to bring in America Chavez, I thought, oh, that's cool, because America Chavez is honestly a very recent creation. I think she was created in like the last decade or so. So to see her being included in the MCU, even though I think she wasn't around when the MCU was first conceived, I think is cool. And on top of that, they do have a compelling arc with her. Her struggles to try and her struggles throughout the film of trying to control her powers and so forth, that's a very interesting story arc to have, especially when you learn her backstory. When she first manifested her powers, it not only cost her her home, but her family. She is lost in an infinite multiverse, and she has no idea if her family is even alive. And considering that her powers were manifested when she was younger, that means she's been doing this for at least a few years. And imagine being just lost, traveling through endless universes, endless possibilities, all of them so alien and foreign in nature, and not having any control over it. It's actually pretty scary when you think about it. And yet America does her best to try and hold it in and stay strong. But at the same time, you do see her kind of dealing with the pain, because she's, again, at the end of the day, still a kid. When she's put in danger, she's clearly scared. She has no idea what she's doing. She's not a superhero. She's just a kid who can punch stars, who can create star-shaped portals or punch star-shaped holes in things. She is not a superhero. At least not yet. At least not yet. And so her reactions throughout this movie of and ultimately when by the end, when Steven tells her, these are your powers, you have to control them. And it's actually pretty satisfying when she does learn to control them, which admittedly does come right out of the blue, because seriously, she's been struggling with these powers for like the greater part of her lives, and all it takes is a pep talk from the rotting corpse of the former Sorcerer Supreme, and suddenly she realizes, oh yeah, punch things really hard, open portals. Like that's kind of dumb. But at the same time, you do feel compelled. At the same time, you do understand her plight. You do feel sorry for her. You do grow to like her, and you don't want anything bad to happen to her. It's a nice little story arc for her as we see her eventually come into her own through her interactions with Strange, which I like. And talking about other strong character points, Wanda Maximoff as a villain, I fucking love her. Like for example, if we ignore Wanda Vision for a minute. Her dive to becoming a villain honestly makes sense. As I mentioned, she went through a lot of shit in the previous movies. Before her debut, she lost her parents, she almost died, her home was turned into a war zone, she was experimented by Hydra and got these strange powers. She was forced to fight the Avengers, and when she eventually did wind up joining them, she wound up losing her brother. And while she was able to gain new family with the Avengers, that quickly fell apart because of the events of Civil War, but she still found love in Vision, who, unfortunately, still died. It's honestly, like, her dive into becoming a supervillain does make sense, because there's only so much trauma that can ultimately be piled onto someone before they snap. It's clear that Wanda really did need help prior to this point, but nobody could see it. And when she finally did break down, it was in the most explosive way possible, which brings us back to WandaVision. That honestly helped, I think, taking WandaVision into consideration, her turn still makes sense. In WandaVision, she had a life, she had family, she had people she loved, even if they were her creations. And ultimately, her realizing that what she was doing was wrong also meant saying goodbye to these people again. Doubly so with Vision, because by the end, Vision did realize he was a fake. But at the same time, also saying goodbye to her kids. Now, imagine with me, if you will, having to live through that nightmare, knowing that your children are just erased from existence, and then every night dreaming of you having a happy life with them. That, I think, would take a heavy toll on anyone, which is especially more jarring when the theory that posited in this movie is thrown out. that dreams are windows into parallel universes. Yeah, I think anyone would go crazy, especially with her having control of the Darkhold, which, as they stated, corrupts everything it touches. So being in contact with that, I think, definitely adds well. So seeing her go full villain in this one, it doesn't feel out of place. It definitely feels jarring, though, especially since even in WandaVision, she was trying to do the right thing and was trying to be the good guy, even if she did f up. So to see her go just cross the line and finally say, screw it, I'm the villain now, it's very jarring. And as a villain, oh my holy god, she's a badass and scary one. This is another reason why I think Sam Raimi was a good pick for this movie. Because the scares legitimately work. There was a reason why they wanted it with Sam Raimi for this. They wanted to give it the air of a horror movie. And when Wanda is doing her thing, she definitely qualifies. I already meant, like, some very notable scenes with her case, I think, would be like the apple orchard when she drops the hex and you see the orchard she's been in is rotted, decayed. It looks like it's been destroyed in a storm. Looks like it's been utterly obliterated. The house that she was staying in is caved in, almost like she destroyed it in a fit of rage. Like, this is somewhat, like, that is just a window into the effed up stuff she's done. And as the film goes on, the layers of effed upness just keep going. We see her just obliterate. We see, like, when she goes to Camertage and how she tempts one of the students to run. It's like she's appearing to him phantom-like and then just whispering into his ear, run. And it just causes her to, it's like, it gives her the air of a demon. Like, throughout the whole film, that's what she seems to be emulating. She's like a fucking demon. The way she moves, the way she goes around, the way she just endlessly and tirelessly just pursues America throughout reality, throughout the multiverse, just because she wants her power, just because she wants to see her kids again. It's so fucking creepy, and I think Elizabeth Olsen plays it well. When during the scene when she came to Camertage and Strange tried talking with her, they have this scene and Strange said, "I understand your anger is justified. No one sacrificed more than you." And her response to that is, sorry, I closed this. I should not have closed it. Her response to this is, hold on, I know I wrote it down. I blew a hole through the head of the man I loved, and it meant nothing. So don't you dare talk to me about sacrifice. That is, and even throughout the whole thing, when Strange tells her, you can't have America, you can just see the bitter rage boiling over. You can see her get, like, she looks like she just wants to strangle Steven right there for daring to say no to her after all the crap she's been through. It really is effective, and I think and throughout the whole movie, she plays it up so well. She plays it off as detached or something inhuman. I already mentioned that scene where she crawls out of the shield and her limbs are just they look just twisted and mangled as she crawls out like a demon, like a demon rising from hell. When the scene where she's possessing her counterpart on Earth 838 and you see her just stumbling through, you see the blood falling down her face. See blood or oil falling down her face, and you see the damage her body is doing, and you see her just following after them. She's just like hobbling along. She looks so inhuman, especially when she's in the shadows and you see her eyes glowing red. It's so fucking creepy, and she looks like a monster. She does not look human anymore. Whatever was human in her has died, and it's just so effing creepy. Every scene with her is creepy, and that's another thing this film does well. It does creepy well. The tension, the camera angles, the silent moments, the build up. It definitely just gives you an air of unease and fear. When we see Steven and Christine step into Psycho Strange's universe and see the whole thing decayed, it just feels off. Like there's just like this universe is just wrong. By its very, like, just seeing everything going wrong, you just feel like you just get the impression that you don't belong there. And it really works. Seeing the demons that Wanda conjures up, they definitely look something they just definitely look like true monsters. And even when Steven possesses his zombie counterpart's body, it's still creepy, especially when you see him hobbling along and the body still clearly having rigor mortis set in, so it's still stiff, and having Strange have to maneuver the body or just the jutting sudden movements, especially and as when he summons the soul. Get a drink. When the souls of the damned come out and start trying to rip Steven apart, it's just so goddamn creepy and just so weird. But by that same token, when Steven does control them, it still feels triumphant, especially when he forces them to be to be his cape, which honestly I think is still really kind of badass. Effed up, but badass. And again, it still embraces the silliness, especially when he unleashes them on Wanda. I love it. But going back to Wanda, at the same time, though, you do understand her motives. Again, her motives have been corrupted by her utilizing the Darkhold, but at the end of the day, all she wants is to see her kids again. And again, considering everything she's gone through, that's not an unsympathetic reason. It's just that in order to get to that goal, she's willing to pile up a lot of bodies. Going back to when Steven called her out and said, well, when you get to that universe, what are you going to do with those kids as mom? And she has no answer. Instead, she just gets angry because, well, because if she answers that, that's like confirming that she really is the bad guy. And just even like throughout the whole film, she's blaming everyone else for all the deaths she's causing. Like, oh, you're doing this to yourselves. I just want my kids. You are all in the way. And even her justification for why she's killing America is because, oh, she's not really a child. She's just a magical anomaly. Has no control over her powers. I'm doing everyone a favor by getting rid of her. But everything revolving around her kids, she does genuinely want. When she first steps into the body of her 838 counterpart, she has you see the demon just seem to fade for a minute as she sees her kids just do this little routine trying to convince their mom to get them ice cream. And just for that brief moment, she stops. She stops pursuing America and just spends time with her kids. And you can see just her heart melting by just having this small moment together with her kids. And like I said, when the Dreamwalker spell was undone, you saw that when she fell, there was a spoon and what looked like the remains of a plate or a bowl by her body, which meant that just for those just for that brief minute that she was with her kids, she was happy. And she was willing to just let herself fade into the fantasy, being a mother again. She was not hunting America in that time. She just wanted to spend time with her kids. And so it makes sense that when she finally does snap back to reality, it's her kids that are the ones that do it. When her kids are afraid of her, they call her a monster. And she tries to say, no, I'm not a monster. I wouldn't hurt anyone. And the weight of all the evil she's done hits her hard. And she realizes, I am a monster. I am the bad guy here. And realizing that everything she's done so far has been for nothing. That she really is just the villain that everyone's been saying she is. And it's, again, so powerful, especially when her counterpart goes up to her and says, they'll know that they'll be loved. It's just a sweet little moment, and again, it's one of those moments that showcases that despite their differences, the other Wanda at least did understand her. And then, of course, let's finally talk about Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange himself. He has a very interesting arc throughout this movie. The first Doctor Strange talked about Steven being humbled, so to speak, as someone who always had to come out a success, who always had to have himself be on the top and never made mistakes. And part of that film's journey was about him realizing that he couldn't always be on the top, that sometimes you will lose, but there's nothing wrong with that. That ultimately learning that lesson is what helped defeat Dormammu, as he was willing to lose 1,000 times as long as everybody else won. That showcased character development, and this film, I think, continues on the journey in that regard. For starters, and that starts from the very beginning. When Steven goes to Christine's wedding, he runs into one of his former colleagues, a Dr. West, who it turns out was also poofed away in the 5-year gap, and he's not exactly happy to see Strange either. As it turns out, in the 5-year gap, he lost people close to him, specifically his cats and his brother. And he even begins asking Steven, was that the only path? Was that the only way? And Steven says, yeah, it was. And the guy clearly just thinks that there could have been other ways. So, again, and even Christine points out, you're always the one that has to hold the knife, which honestly, I think makes a lot of sense, and that's showcased in the film. And I think it's even reflected when you see the other versions of Strange throughout the movie. Each of them, in one way, shape, or form, is the guy that carried the burden, and that burden always corrupted them. Going with the first Doctor Strange, the one we saw at the beginning of the movie, who was with America at first. That Strange was willing to let her die so that Wanda wouldn't get her power. And what I love is that he says word for word almost the same line that Strange said to Peter in Spider-Man No Way Home, that in the grand calculus of the multiverse, their sacrifice will mean more than their lives. Their sacrifice will mean more than their lives. Because when you hear that line, you can see the similarities that we have with that our Steven has with those Stevens. Now, our Steven underwent a bit of character development in Far From Home, because by the end he did realize that Peter wasn't in the right by wanting to help fix those people. And even in the end, when Peter wanted to cast the spell to make everyone forget about him, Strange was almost unwilling to do it. So there is a bit of character development there, but to see it reflected in this other Strange who betrayed America, it does lay a groundwork, especially with the idea of Strange having to always do these things himself, having to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. And throughout the whole movie, Strange is kind of grappling with that ideal, that he has to be the one to carry everything on his shoulders. He's got to be the one that always makes the sacrifices, who makes the tough calls, and how those choices ultimately affect everybody. And we see those choices reflected in the other Doctor Stranges. When the Illuminati talk about how Stephen Strange is a threat to the multiverse itself, while initially you do kind of think they're being jerks for no reason, especially when they say that all Strangers are like that, when you see the other Stranges in this movie, you can kind of understand why. While the Doctor Strange of their universe did ultimately join them and stop Thanos in the end, because he wanted to go it alone and use the Darkhold, he was starting to get corrupted, and he had to be dealt with. And on top of that, because of his poor decision making, an entire universe died. And then of course there's the Psycho Strange that we meet at the end. That version of Strange was a version who realized he wasn't happy with Christine moving on, and in his desperation to get her back, just kept traveling between alternate universes, caused an incursion which destroyed his reality. But rather than learning from that, he kept the Darkhold, and he has hunted and he has used its power to kill other Stranges. And when he sees that our Strange came to his domain with a Christine of his own, his response is, "Tell you what, I'll give you this book if you give me the girl." It's just fucking insane. And if you want to even use more Doctor Stranges as a basis, let's go with a What If. In episode 4 of What If, we were introduced to a version of Strange called Strange Supreme, a version of Doctor Strange from a universe where Christine was in the car accident with him, and thus instead of his hands being crippled, she died. And thus, in that universe, when Strange became the Sorcerer Supreme, he wound up destroying his universe to undo her fate, resulting in him gaining ultimate power, but everyone else paying the price. That is danger. When you see that baseline and then compare it to our Strange, you can see the similarities. You can see the seeds of arrogance in there. But what makes it better is that you see throughout the movie, when Steven is confronted by these dark realities of his alternate selves and the paths they've chosen, it affects him too. By the end, he isn't... throughout the film, he's just trying his best to do the right thing, trying to keep America safe, and trying to ensure that her life is not sacrificed for the betterment of others. Keep in mind that yes, while he's ultimately the one that does end up taking the big risk, but ultimately it's when all other options have been exhausted. He tried to play it safe. He promised to protect America, and he kept that promise. He stayed by her side and offered comfort when she needed it. When he learned what happened to her parents, he was there saying, "They're somewhere out there, and if they're anything like you, they're probably okay." Or when he learned what happened to his counterpart, he wanted to also look for the Book of the Vishanti, and thus he sought it out. But ultimately, with the book destroyed and him and Christine stranded in another universe while America was trapped with the Scarlet Witch, he realized he had no other options, and he was the only one. And like with Dormammu, he was still willing to let himself go under the knife if it meant other people are saved. And the ultimate culmination of this is when he doesn't is when he doesn't take America's powers. He tells her, these are your powers. You have to be the one to do this. You have to be the one to stop her. He's letting someone else hold the knife, so to speak, and he's trusting them. He's telling them, you got this. It's him putting his faith in others, letting other people take the helm and fight back and fight the battle. Yeah, he does come out of it still scarred, but he's okay because other people are safe. Other people have made this journey and are fine. Yeah, he's willing to take the risks that others aren't, but he only takes those risks so others don't. And while those other Stranges definitely had similar mindsets, those similar mindsets also led them to do things that they shouldn't have done. Keep in mind that the 838 Stephen took the Darkhold before they went to the Book of the Vishanti. The other Psycho Strange wanted to use the Darkhold because he missed his girlfriend, because he didn't see his girlfriend. And the go-to option for the first Strange we saw was to absorb America's powers, and his justification was the same that Strange's was in No Way Home, that her life is meaningless in the grand calculus of the multiverse. Which, thankfully, because of the events of No Way Home, which ultimately I think this was pointed out to me in a review, so that actually is a good one. In No Way Home, Strange realized the error of his ways when he saw Peter actually fix the villains, and on top of that, to see this girl who, guess what? This is kind of she's a very unique case, because in the movie she reveals that she has no counterparts in the multiverse. There's only one of her, so she's gone. There's not another version of her out there to help. It's just like, this is a version, like, to see him actually he's willing to take, but in this case, while like his counterparts, he's willing to take risks to help up. He's willing to take risks for the greater good, so to speak. At the very least, he wants to ensure that the only one who suffers is him. He's got to be the one to take the risk. And he's not doing it because he wants to be the one in charge. He wants to be sure he's doing it because there are no other ways. But if there are other ways, he will always look for them. He will always keep fighting. And it's exemplified by the end when, instead of absorbing America's powers because, well, she can't control them, he tells America, you got this. They're your powers. You can control them. You can beat her. That's actually it's Steven pretty much saying, I can take you, this is as far as I can take you, the rest is up to you. It's Steven conceding, Steven stepping aside, letting someone else take the spotlight. It's again furthering his development. He realizes that there's always going to be consequences, but as long as he's the one facing them and no one else, he's good with it. And as long as there's someone else there taking the risk, as long as there's someone else willing to fight and they don't have to die, he's willing to help them as well. He's willing to do what it takes to help and support them, help them on their journey, rather than saying, "Oh, I'm the big guy here, so I have to do this journey alone." No, he wants to make sure that they are properly taken care of, and I think it's good. And it's good. It's really good and great character development, and I like it. So, yeah. I'm trying to think of anything else I liked. Again, the action I think was pretty cool, as always. The effects, I think, are very nice. And another thing that I think helps add to the tone of the movie is the music. The music is also another thing that helps keep it into the camp, because it can get very fast paced, and during very intense scenes, you can get like little rock music and so forth that kind of plays and reverberates throughout. So I like that. It helps really add to the tone of the movie and how weird and silly it is, but it also can help add to the fear factor. One very cool scene that I also like, which adds to the creepiness, is when Wanda is getting ready to possess her Earth 838 counterpart, and as she's wandering around, you see the environment you see things just going weird, lights flickering, dishes flying, a picture of herself come to life and look at her. It's all very creepy, and I thought it really worked. And the rest of the film does well in showcasing that. The music does well in showcasing the hokiness and the creepiness that went into this project. So I liked that. But overall, though, I still think this is a really fun movie. It's still really fun. It's got its flaws. I will not deny it. While I genuinely did love the campy nature of everything, I will also admit that that it does kind of impede the movie when it does try to be more serious and does kind of keep it in play and does kind of hold it back somewhat. But with that being said, it's still a lot of fun. With that being said, the movie does clearly embrace that camp and just has fun with it. And when it does that, it allows for some very creative and fun scenarios. It definitely amps up the creepy factor with the Scarlet Witch and what she's doing. When things go wrong, it really does feel well. The characters are well written and all have interesting arcs. There's a lot of cool fan service with seeing the alternate universes and so forth. I loved the Wanda as a villain. I think worked really well. The main arcs for the main characters was really good. The acting was all around great. Overall, I think this is a really good movie. Campy and silly, but also creepy action packed, and just all around fun. So, if you're interested, I recommend checking it out. So, yeah, I think that's about all I can say. If you stayed for this entire 2 hours, I thank you for that. But I hope you genuinely enjoyed this. And as always, I'm Samuel Johnson. I hope you have a good night. And the next time we venture back into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's time we check back in with the God of Thunder as we see him explore the cosmos and potentially hand off the title to another in Thor: Love and Thunder.